Betrayal is a very cruel thing to experience. The painful part about it is that it always costs something precious. This something could be a valued relationship, emotional stability, or property, but in Skylar Neese's case, it cost her life. Skylar was a promising teenager with her whole life ahead of her, but it was cruelly cut short by betrayal from her best friends. Welcome back to the Crime Lab channel. In today's video, we'll explore the story of Skylar Neese, a 16-year-old girl murdered by her best friends. Skylar Neese was the only child of Dave and Mary Neese. The family lived together in a small town in West Virginia called Star City. For someone who grew up in a small city with about 1,800 residents, Skylar was known by everyone. She was very friendly and described as a pleasant girl who always had a smile on her face. Skylar attended Morgantown University High School, and at the time of her death, she was in her second year of high school. Friendly as she was, Skylar was a straight A student who dreamed of becoming a criminal defense lawyer. After her first year, she got a job at Wendy's where she worked through the summer, and whenever she didn't have any shifts to cover, she'd hang out with her friends. Typically, as she grew older, she made new friends, and subconsciously her childhood best friend Morgan was replaced with two new best friends, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shove. They were classmates at school, and they all worked at Wendy's. There were hardly any pictures of them without the other two, and they referred to themselves as the Three Musketeers. The girls had all kinds of fun together, the naughty ones and those that weren't so naughty. They went shopping together and sleepovers and had a favorite spot where they would often sneak off and smoke weed. They did risky acts together, and on one occasion the police caught them outside past curfew time and sent them back to their houses. Skylar's parents were concerned about the wild adventures she and her friends went on, but most times they let it slide on the basis that juvenile rebellion passes as teenagers get older. Besides, they trusted their daughter, so their worry never lasted long. Sheila and Skylar had been friends since they were 8, and their families lived close together. Nevertheless, as they got closer, Skylar's parents noticed characters in Sheila they were not very thrilled by. Dave, Skylar's father, said Sheila felt like she was the center of the universe and didn't show any interest in anything that wasn't about her. Although they weren't fond of Sheila, they never thought that she would be a threat to Skylar's safety. Unknown to them, the relationship they overlooked would cost them the life of their only child. On the night of July 5th, 2012, Skylar came home from work and went to her parents' room. According to her father, she embraced them and told them she loved them before going to her room.
A kiss and gave her a hug and said, "I love you, Mom." She turned to me and said, "I love you, Dad," and she went to the room.
Unfortunately, this was the last time they would see their precious Skylar. At noon the next day, Dave walked into Skylar's room to have lunch with her. When he found the room empty, her bed wasn't laid, and one of the windows was slightly open. Worried, he called Sheila to ask if she'd seen Skylar, but she denied, saying the last time they spoke was around midnight. After calling Skylar several times with no response, her parents decided to wait until she resumed her shift at Wendy's later that day and hoped she'd call home. However, when it was time for her shift, Dave and Mary received a phone call from Wendy's asking if Skylar would show up at work. At this point, Dave and Mary feared that Skylar had been abducted and filed a missing persons report.
I have a daughter that's 16 years old. Apparently she snuck out of her room last night and she hasn't been seen since. None of her friends can get a hold of her. I can't find her.
Hey, what's her name?
Skylar Neese.
Immediately, the police and the entire neighborhood began a town-wide search for Skylar. Everyone was trying to find answers to the same question: what happened to Skylar Neese? As investigations continued, the police acquired surveillance footage taken by cameras in Skylar's apartment complex. According to the footage, Skylar left her bedroom, which was on the ground floor, through her window. The video showed her crossing the street and getting into a car before driving out of the frame by 12:30 a.m. on July 6th. Due to the quality of the video, the police could not decipher the car's license plate or who was driving it. After being questioned, Sheila and Rachel told the police that all three girls met up on the night of July 5th, but they returned before midnight. According to them, they went to their spot to hang out, and when they were done, they dropped Skylar off at the beginning of the street because she insisted on walking home alone. The search for Skylar went on, but for months no substantial lead was found regarding the case. The local police even had assistance from the FBI, but that didn't help much either. The breakthrough in the case was when one of Skylar's BFFs, Rachel, had an emotional breakdown and went to the police to give an account of what had happened the midnight Skylar disappeared. A few days later, before her disappearance, Skylar had a fallout with her two best friends, Sheila and Rachel. However, on July 5th, Sheila and Rachel persuaded Skylar that they all snuck out of their houses and hung out at their spot at midnight. Skylar was very hesitant, but her friends repeatedly apologized with a bunch of texts and calls, so before long, she changed her mind and decided to meet up with them. In Rachel's account of the story, she affirmed that Skylar snuck out around midnight and entered a car that was hers after convincing Skylar to go with them on a night drive. They drove through Blacksville, and after several minutes of driving, they stopped across the Pennsylvania border on the edge of the forest to smoke weed. Once the girls were out of the vehicle, they told Skylar that they had forgotten to bring a lighter, and she volunteered to get hers from her bag in the car. As she turned her back to her friends, Rachel and Sheila counted to 3 and began stabbing Skylar with knives they hid in their hoodies on the count of 3. Skylar ran from there, but she couldn't outrun both girls. Rachel ran after her, pushed her to the ground and stabbed her in her chest. Sheila and Rachel stood over their dying friend, and when her neck stopped making gurgling sounds, they took her body over to the creek and buried it under rocks. Then they changed their blood-stained clothes to clean clothes from the car and drove home, where they carried on with their lives as if nothing had happened. According to Rachel, she and Sheila had planned the whole incident several months before it happened. When Rachel was asked, she said Skylar's last words was "why?" And when the police asked why they did it, they said it was because they didn't like Skylar. The police found Skylar's body in the exact spot that Rachel described. Soon the news that Skylar's body had been found traveled throughout Star City.
The search for Monongalia County teenager Skylar Neese is over.
And the entire neighborhood relieved their grief. But the police didn't say anything about Rachel and Sheila's involvement in her death. They hoped to incriminate Sheila first. Sheila appeared as a downcast as everyone close to Skylar at the news of her death. On one occasion, Sheila and Skylar's mom went up to Skylar's room, where they both cried for a while, mourning the most important person in their lives. After the news of Skylar's body being found was put out, Sheila tweeted, "Rest easy, Skylar. You'll always be my best friend. I miss you more than you could ever know." However, that was not the first time Sheila tweeted about Skylar. After Rachel's confession, some of Sheila's old tweets began to make sense to the police. 5 months after the murder, Sheila tweeted, "No one on earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." On April 1st, 2013, she tweeted, "They say you remember the past better than it really was." And another tweet which read, "We really did go on 3. All this while she had been tweeting about her and Rachel's involvement in Skylar's death, and nobody knew. After a few months of further investigation, both girls were arrested for the murder of Skylar Neese. On May 1st, 2013, Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison and eligibility for parole after 10 years. Unlike Rachel, Sheila showed no remorse throughout her trial. After a long trial, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with mercy, and according to state laws, she's eligible for parole after 15 years. Skylar's parents were completely heartbroken, to say the least. While the death of their only child caused excruciating heartache, according to them, Sheila's pretense and lack of remorse for her evil actions caused a whole other level of pain.
Sheriff did cooperate, and Rachel Sheriff also murdered my daughter in cold blood. She can take her apologies and everything else and sit on them because that's about what they're worth to me and my wife. She has done nothing but make our lives a living hell since this day one.
Thank you for watching this video. Hit us up in the comment section and give us a thumbs up if you liked it, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos.